It's the Chronicles of a Gooner, and we're live. Hello, good evening, and welcome back to the Chronicles of a Gooner, the Arsenal podcast brought to you by the Last Man Standing with loserpool.com. As ever, I'm your host, Harry Symeou. And on this week's preview show, we are looking ahead to Arsenal's trip up to Vicarage Road this coming Sunday, 4:30 p.m. It's the Sky Live game. And I'm pleased to say that I'm joined by Andy Lewers, Watford fan, Watford podcaster, radio host, and also Andy, you do another podcast too. Do you want to let our listeners know about that? Because it is a Premier League podcast, isn't it?
It certainly is. Yeah. Hi, Harry. Thanks for having me on. So the new podcast we just started this season, it's called Stairway to Seventh. And the catch is that it's a Premier League podcast solely dedicated to the clubs outside of the Big Six in the Premier League. So not necessarily the top six, necessarily it's the Big Six. So Arsenal, Liverpool, Chelsea, United, City and Spurs, they're not included in the show at all. It's sort of a safe haven for other supporters in the Premier League to just have sort of their time to shine, if you like, because we feel a little bit hard done by when we watch things like Match of the Day and listen to 606.
I think you should start including Spurs in there as well, though. Just to, I think that.
Certainly Chelsea and United are looking strong contenders to be in next season's podcast. That's for sure.
Absolutely. So we're here to talk about Arsenal's trip to Watford on Sunday, and if I'm not mistaken, you've been on the podcast before. We had you on last season, didn't we?
Yes, you did.
Brilliant stuff. And I remember we got into a little bit of not a disagreement, but we were talking about the Troy Deeney thing, the thing that keeps rumbling on between Arsenal and Watford. And, you know, lots of people love to point to that. It's kind of like the side story, isn't it, between Arsenal and Watford. But I want to start off by getting your thoughts on the recent happenings at Vicarage Road, because I was a little bit surprised to hear that Javi Gracia had got the sack. And then I looked at his recent record. First of all, before we talk about who's replaced him, what were your initial feelings? Did you see it coming? And how do you feel about it?
So a lot of supporters outside the Watford sphere were obviously sort of quite taken aback. You know, when you look at it on the face of it, last season we had our record Premier League points total and, of course, that FA Cup final. But for a lot of Watford fans, we weren't actually that surprised. We were disappointed because we all took a shine to Javi. We really liked him as our head coach, the way he represented our club. He was a really popular figure around Vicarage Road. But when you go into a bit more depth, we had won 33 points in our last 32 league games. Our last clean sheet came in February. Our last two victories in the league were against Fulham, who we relegated that night, and against already relegated Huddersfield. There was a consistency to sort of play players who are underperforming and stick with the formation that had been worked out from opposition sides. So it was a really difficult decision, and I was quite taken aback at the timing of it. I think if the owners were going to do it, they would do it sort of on the Monday morning after the Newcastle game. The fact they waited a week to do it during the international break made me think that he'd be given a little bit more time to sort it out. So that was kind of the thing that surprised me, not necessarily that Javi actually went. But that doesn't mean to say myself and other Watford fans weren't disappointed, because he was a really popular figure.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, when you look at it in a little bit more detail, you can understand why Watford, pulled the trigger. Because if I'm not mistaken, I think the only wins since March were Fulham and Huddersfield. And, that is not really acceptable. And I know Watford ended up finishing 11th last season, lost the FA Cup final. Anyone can get beaten by Manchester City. They're that good at the moment. But my sort of question to you is, was the manner of that defeat ultimately, a real mark against Javi's name?
I personally don't think so. Not the FA Cup anyway. I think the manner of the defeat, certainly at home this season, probably did for Javi. With the FA Cup, what people are yes, we obviously got we got spanked 6-0. It was a little bit embarrassing on the day, but what people are forgetting, that's a one-off game. If that's a league game and we go 2-0 down before half time, you're probably saying, let's shut up shop, damage limitation sort of thing, try and keep our goal difference respectable. But because it's that one-off game, that final, Watford had to push forward. Watford had to throw men towards City's goal and try and get something back, which obviously left us exposed at the back. So it's kind of no surprise once we went 2-0 down before half-time that we conceded those 4 goals in the second half. So whilst it was obviously a bit humiliating, no one wants to go to Wembley for only their second ever FA Cup final and come away with the joint highest defeat in a major final. I think it was more so the manner of the defeats at the start of this season. Brighton and West Ham at home were absolutely miserable, and we just looked like we didn't really have a clue. So it has been relegation form since probably about February, March time earlier this year.
Interesting stuff. Now, lots of the time, you look at a team's results and you make a judgment. And often, if you don't watch the team every week, and I admittedly don't watch Watford every week, you can assume that maybe things are worse than they are. But has it been that bad? Has there been literally no signs of things improving?
There was some there. I mean, there's always a bit of positivity around Watford. We're in good hands, and whilst results don't go our way, we know we've got a decent squad. It's not like we've just come up from the Championship and half our squad's injured, etc. We have a good squad, and we did have a good transfer window offensively. Anyway, we broke our transfer record, bringing in Ismail Assar for 30 million. Brought in Danny Welbeck from you guys, of course. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
And kept the likes of Delapia and Decore, who are hugely important to our squad. So, going forward, attacking wise, we've got plenty of options. It was, I think, defensively is what sort of did it for Javi. We were crying out at the back end of last season. Obviously, you probably watched the FA Cup final and seen Man City walk all over us. Defensively, we just aren't good enough at the moment, and I think myself and a lot of Watford fans were left baffled that we didn't do a bit more defensively to bolster that back line in the transfer window. And sadly, we're paying the price at the moment. But there's still plenty of positivity. Obviously, Kike's come in, and he's still a well-liked figure around Watford. So we're looking up. We're sitting rock bottom. So literally for us, the only way is up.
Yeah, absolutely. And to come in on to Kike, now he's a manager who I thought was unlucky to lose his job in the first place. And I was having this debate with somebody the other day, and I'd like to get your take on this, because obviously I'm not a Watford fan, but people talk about the Pozzos and how they fire people so quickly. But if you look at sort of where Watford have finished pretty much under, and the fact that they've survived and done what they've done under their sort of ownership, you can't really knock their approach, can you?
Yeah, you're absolutely right, and that's kind of why Watford fans get a little bit irked when pundits and journos just start saying Watford have a revolving door policy, etc. And it's really not the case. People have been ignoring the fact that in the time that we've had Gracia as our head coach, Chelsea have gone through Conte, Sarri, and Lampard.
Great point.
Because they're Chelsea, because they're expected to compete, because they're expected to be in these major finals year on year, no one bats an eyelid. But because this is how it feels anyway, because we're sort of little old Watford, we should know our place in the football pyramid and know that an FA Cup final will only come once every 35 years. And that's not the case. That's not the vision. We are in this league to compete. We want to be ambitious. We want to push ourselves and achieve the impossible for Watford. And if managers aren't able to progress us to that next level, then the owners, they're not afraid to make a tough decision. We haven't fired all our previous managers. There have obviously been a few. Kike didn't get sacked at the end of his first season. It was he did have an option for a second season in his contract, but both he and the owners decided not to continue on to the second season. Obviously, Mazzari and Silva, the less said about those two, the better. They did get the sack alongside of course, but there's always been a reasonable justification behind the owners' decisions, and I think that's what frustrates us really, is that people won't do their research and just jump straight to conclusions, when actually, if you like you're doing, speaking to a Watford fan and getting an actual fan's opinion on it, we're actually completely okay with it.
Yeah, fair play. Great points indeed. Are you expecting there to be a new manager bounce now with Quique Sanchez Flores, and how are you feeling going into Sunday's game?
Well, games against Arsenal are always good fun, aren't they? They're always pretty close. There's always a great atmosphere at the game. Am I expecting a new manager bounce? I expect a reaction. I expect a performance at least. I'm not naive enough to sit here and say yes, we're gonna get all 3 points. That's I would happily take a point on Sunday. But I'm expecting a reaction from the players. I want to see us a bit more solid at the back. I'm not too fussed about goals at this current stage, because I think they'll come with our attacking options. I just want to see us a bit more solid and put in a decent performance. And if we lose, then we lose. Arsenal are a very good side. But if I can walk away from Vicarage Road saying that was much better than our previous 4 games this season, then actually I'll be pretty happy and a lot more confident for the season ahead.
Absolutely. Now, to let the Arsenal fans know, because and this is not a disrespect to Watford, I say this about any Premier League club. As Arsenal fans, we don't watch other clubs every week. We don't have. Where would you find the time to sit and watch all sort of 10 games every weekend? But from a Watford perspective, who are the players that Arsenal fans should be worried about, should be looking out for, and how have Watford sort of been setting up so far this season? Can you give us any insight into how you think? I know it's difficult to say with a new manager, but based on what you've seen, who should we be looking out for?
Yeah, so I think you've got to keep an eye out for new man Ismail Assar, signed for a record fee of 30 million over the summer, a winger. He's not really featured in the league that much this season. In fact, he's only featured in our defeat to West Ham in the league, but played in the League Cup against Coventry a couple of weeks ago, got his first goal there. But he was involved in the AFCON final, so he has sort of had an extended period of rest. But now we've had the international break. I'm hoping he'll be starting on Sunday. He is hopefully going to be one of our key players this season. You might remember, obviously, when we brought Richarlison in a couple of seasons ago, he hit the ground running for life in the Premier League, and kind of hopefully a similar story for Sarr as well. In terms of setup, it's, do you know what, I don't think any Watford fan would be able to call it. Javi favoured a sort of 4-2-2-2 formation, which I wasn't really a fan of because I thought we were far too narrow. But in the latter stages, he would switch that to maybe a 3-4-3 formation with Quique. What did he do? It feels so long ago since he was with us. Quique sort of set up in a classic 4-4-2. At the start of the campaign, we had Igalo and Dini on song for the first half of that 15-16 season. And it probably wouldn't surprise me if he sets up the same again. I think just because it's something that we know as a club, something that the players know, and something that he's comfortable with as well. But it wouldn't surprise me if he maybe utilises the players that we have going forward, Deulofeu, Pereira, Sarr, etc., Welbeck, of course. It wouldn't surprise me if he opts to change the formation a bit further down the line.
Brilliant stuff. And just finally, mate, a prediction. How do you see this one going?
Difficult to say. Well, obviously no Dini for the Hornets, so it's going to make us a little bit weaker up front, isn't it? Let's say, I've always got to be positive. New manager, Quique's back at the Vic. It's going to be a 2-1 victory to the Hornets.
Oh, bold prediction. I'm going to save my prediction. I'm going to put it out on tomorrow's podcast where I'll be sharing my preferred starting lineup. And I'll be looking ahead to the game from an Arsenal perspective in a little bit more detail. But a huge thanks to you, Andy, for coming on and sharing your thoughts and giving us some insight into Watford. We are trying very hard to provide to our listeners a little bit of insight into our opponents week on week. And thank you once again for being a good sport and coming on.
Pleasure, mate. Thanks for having me.
Great stuff. That is Andy Lewers. And just quickly, before we lock off the stream, guys, don't forget you can tune in to the fans phone in. That is coming up on Tuesday night at 9:30 p.m. I think. Yep, that's right. Where you'll be able to call in and have your say on the game. So please do look out for that and do come join us. We'll be back on. Well, no, I was going to say on Monday, but we'll be back tomorrow where I'll be bringing you my preferred starting lineup and, of course, my prediction. And then, of course, we'll be taking a day off on Saturday and Sunday and back on Monday with the review. So until then, guys, take care. Bye-bye.